Welcome back, Wargamers, to the ancient halls of the Spires as we continue our discussion of that truly horrific and fascinating race that spans the entire breadth of Ea. This is part 2 of my series on the Spires. In case you missed it, I do have a link in the description down below to part 1. Go ahead and start there and get caught up. And I want to say right before we dig in, that I do have an affiliate code to Bellum, which is the makers of Conquest. That'll save you 10% in the description down below. It's all your purchases, 10% off, and it goes a long way to helping the channel. A huge thank you to everyone who's already used it. It's life-changing stuff. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So, picking up from where we left off, Sovereign came through the void, and he was the highest noble on Ea. And he sealed the gateway behind him, ensuring that no more of his race, which are now collectively known as the Exiles, can come. And this wasn't a cheap bid to be the supreme power of the Exiles, which are now, functionally, a very shattered population. Some Exiles saw this as an opportunity to restart their race without the bindings of ancient beliefs and hierarchies, and so they divided into 3 camps, 3 responses to this event. We have the Quiet, the Weavers, and the Spires. Each of them, like I said, is just a different approach to how they want to see the Exiles rebuild their broken society. The Spires, our main subject for today, were of the mind to stick to the old ways, keep to the noble lineages, and to do that they crafted a peasant race with the use of a magic called biomancy. Now, Sovereign is the highest ranking of these lineages, as we had just said, but he just assumed that he got control of everything, right? Oh yeah, all these people who are sticking to the old way, I'm the top of their food chain. But he is pushed back and rebuffed by the other Spire leaders. Remember, the first ones here on this planet were scientists and geologists and explorers and pioneers, and while they wanted to stick to the old ways within their society, because, they're smart guys, it still leaves them on a higher rung of society, they refused to immediately abdicate all authority to Sovereign. We like the old ways, but you don't just get to come in and be supreme ruler, was kind of their idea. This tension exists because they have different goals, fundamentally. All of the Spires revere the old ways of their people to an extent. Noble lineages, scientists, and big thinkers being of a higher class than the average citizen. But the Sovereign House has the ultimate goal of going back to their homeworld and reconquering it from whatever terrible event happened back there. So the big dog on the stage wants to leave eventually. The other leaders of the Spires have no interest in going back home. They rather bring their values, tradition, and heraldry of their old world and just restart. Have the exact same society, but now this is our home. So, when Sovereign starts acting like the big boss and giving orders, all the major scientists and researchers are like, whoa, hold the phone. We were here first, you do not directly command us. In order to have some form of representation and resistance to the will of Sovereign, the founding scientists on Ea banded together and formed one single directorate, an organization of the best and the brightest minds of the Exiles. Collectively, they're able to push back on Sovereign's authority, making their own demands, and so on. And this relationship is what forms the basis of the Spires society as we know it in the current setting. Sovereign wants to go home, and so he pays the directorate in biomass and other resources to research new weapons and build an army that can go home and reconquer their homeland. It's a millennia-long process that is gearing up for a massive invasion of their old homeworld. On the flip side, the directorate, the scientists who were already here, is paid and supplied by Sovereign, allowing them to do whatever research they want, so long as they keep some resources and some research devoted to Sovereign's cause. It's a fairly symbiotic, kind of relationship or economy, I guess. Each of the heads of the directorate is ruler of their own little domain, free to pursue any research they want, and they tithe soldiers and weapons to the cause of Sovereign, who in turn gives them all the supplies and biomass they need, awaiting the day that Sovereign goes home and the directorate inherits Ea. At least that's how they see it. I'm sure other factions, like the Dweghome and the 100 Kingdoms, they would all have a few words to say about the directorate quote-unquote inheriting Ea, but that's for another day. And so that's how we have these 2 sub-factions of the Sovereign lineages and the Directorate, which if you go on the Bellum website, you can see kind of the lore that I got from those. But there is actually a third sub-faction within the Spires, and that is the underspire. This is essentially the working class of the Spire society. As the power dynamic between the sovereign lineages and this new directorate formed, many of the higher-up scientists and thinkers found it useful to move upwards within their spire, like literally upwards. Like if you've seen the spire things, it's like a big tower, like literally moving up to the top floor of it. Why? Because Sovereign lived at the top, and to assert importance and be near political epicenters of their society, the directorate, the heads of state, moved to the top of the spire as well. And so now we have kind of this like second class divide where how high are you on the spire can also dictate how important you are to the society. Which is a little bit backwards because the thing is, the bottom of a spire's tower is of huge significance. Those tall towers that the spires live in are somehow organic in nature. They have roots that dig deep into the crust of the earth, constantly harvesting natural resources and biomass that the spires then use to create troops and that kind of thing. So with the directorate not wanting to be down there anymore, they needed a class to control the hordes of worker drones and monitor the reclamation of resources. Now this responsibility was delegated to the lowly Ferromancers. Less scientific minds that can they're either barred from the use of biomancy or they just don't know how to do it. And you can also be demoted to this position, and that's kind of a constant threat that runs through all of the directorates. If you fail too much, we'll knock you down to the level of a Ferromancer. It's like lower management run amok. Now, I'll go into more detail in a review of the individual units of the faction, but essentially a Ferromancer uses a complex breathing apparatus to emit pheromones to communicate with the drones at work. Remember, the clones and the drones that the Spires use have very little intelligence to them. They want them to be a dumb, almost slave race, and so this is a very primal and efficient way to communicate with them. No words, no commands. You just chemically manufactured instinct responses that have been refined to a pinpoint. Now, this arrangement has essentially made the Ferromancers and anyone else at their level second-class citizens, right? They stay in their little hole, go to the bottom of the tower and just stay there. They're not given much authority or power, and of course, they resent this. They are also exiles. They're also this people who, struck out amongst the stars and should be the inheritors of the entire planet, but they're stuck on, trash duty. So there is a discussion, as always, of rebellion. While the real seeds of such an action have not really been sowed in a huge way, at some point the higher echelon of Spire society will be reminded of just how important the Underspire is, despite how they look down upon them. And so in this way, by breaking the Spires down into their three kind of, sub-factions, big major camps, I'm sure all these guys have their own little power plays that they're working on to, steal control and authority from one another, but the truth is, the three main factions within the Spires are, of course, the sovereign lineages, people who love the old ways and want to go home, the directorate, people who love the old ways and want to stay in control because they're the scientists and the minds who colonized Ea, and of course the underspire, which is just everyone that the other two groups abuse to stay on top. It paints a picture of a very bleak and savage society where power is everything, right? Being able to make decisions and wheel and deal affects thousands of lives beneath you. And so now I want to kind of transition into why is this so freaking cool? I have a few things here I want to talk about because, as you know, Spire is my army. I absolutely love it. And we're going to talk about this. So I like how the Spires represent realistic responses to problems, right? What binds them is a respect for the old ways that their culture used to have. Houses, nobility, some people were just on top, just all those kinds of things. But they can still have different goals. And that creates some wonderful drama between these immensely powerful beings with all the time in the world. For example, Sovereign jealously hoards resources and biomass much more than he lets on. Like, he is far richer in material than he lets the others know. That's why he's able to fund all this stuff. He also, fun fact, keeps the best secrets and weapons for himself, limiting the possibility of the directorate getting too much power and overwhelming him. Now, we'll go to the specifics as we cover the lore behind each unit, but one great example that I love to point out is a unit in the Spires called the Avatara. Essentially, the actual exiles, these truly ancient beings, elf equivalents, they don't want to actually risk their own safety in battle. So they'll have a whole bunch of drones and clones go fight, but if they want to take the field, they will project their consciousness into giant constructs called Avatara. Now, for the vast amount of Spire society, Avatara are a little bit limited because you have to be kind of somewhat near them to project your mind into them. So there's a little bit of danger there. If you see an Avatara, you know there's a Spire guy at least somewhere nearby. Whereas Sovereign has the secret to basically project anywhere. He has so much more power and control when it comes to that unit, which is an extremely big deal when he's also in control of the largest set of lineages within the society. That's just an example, but other things like that where he's hoarding secrets of like next level tech and all this stuff like that so that the directorate can't use it. But it's important to remember the directorate is not immune to this either. It's a bunch of cutthroat and very exacting scientists without a hint of remorse or morality about their creations. They, amongst themselves, created a complicated web of rivals, different research projects, drone armies beneath them, and so on. It means that they are also full of drama and storytelling elements. Like, nobody's the good guy here, but they all think that the ends justify the means for them, but nobody else. Not to mention the fact that both the sovereign lineages, all the things that he does, and the directorate, all the bad things they do, are dependent upon the underspire, which is swelling with the discontent of exiles who got the raw end of the deal when they became part of the spires. Like, if we kind of rewind a bit, when the exiles broke into the quiet, the weavers, and the spires, you think those guys who were treated like second-class citizens were like, this is what I signed up for? It's like, no, I wish I had chosen something else. And so all of a sudden, this momentous, unstoppable house that is Sovereign's lineages and the power of the directorate and all the armies beneath them, they feel very much like a house of cards when you realize that like the people who make those things possible hate this situation. It sets up some great narratives. We don't have rules for each subfaction yet, but I suspect they'll come out at some point. Bellum does a great job with playtesting, and so they're really taking their time, and I appreciate it. And if you didn't know, for every faction, they've created a few sub-factions within it to add a bit of depth, and I absolutely think they nailed it here. These are fantastic villains, all three of them. The Sovereign lineages, the directorate, the underspire, all of them have this little weird ecosystem where they have to work together, even though they all actively have different goals. Because collectively, the spires can say, well, we follow the old ways, But Sovereign represents the worst part of the old ways, right? Entitlement, greed, backed by money and resources. The directorate, same thing, they follow the old ways, but they seek a new future, but have been bogged down with bureaucracy and really strayed away from the morality that their race had, corrupted by the dark sciences that they perform, and of course the underspire as a largely subjugated working class acting as a powder keg for the whole system to blow. The whole thing just sets up great stories, interesting characters that need to walk a fine line being scared of people above them, but also kind of below them with the underspire. So friends, tell me your thoughts on this below. If you were to be dropped into Spire society, which one would you want to be a part of? For me, I'm all about the Sovereign lineages. He's a dude playing the longest of long games. His household has withstood so much change, which to me is a testament to his sheer willpower and his ability to get things done. It doesn't mean he's a good guy, far from it. It just means that he is a capital G great man who can survive and change history. So I like that. I think he's a character that I always want to know more about. But I could definitely see the directorate being a very interesting, science form of government. I don't even know what that would be, a scienceocracy, something like that. I think it's so fascinating. But tell me your thoughts, leave in the comments down below, and I will catch you next time as we tackle the lore for another Conquest army. Tell me which army you want me to cover next. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and I'll catch you next time. Happy wargaming.